Hello again and welcome back to part 2 of On the Line. I'm Christine Williams. Well, joining us now is Dr. Anthony Hutchinson. He is the CEO of Brampton Resource Center. Now, Anthony has an amazing story to tell because he went from living under a bridge to being a professor at Ryerson University, and now he's the CEO of a resource center, and he's here to tell about his story and some of the amazing things that he's doing now to help inner city youth. Dr. Hutchinson, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And our regular viewers also know you from Viewpoints because you've also contributed to the first part of our program.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to contribute to what's going on in our world.
It's great to see you in a personal light now and hear about your story. Now, normally we start from the start and go to where you are now. I'm actually going to start the other way and ask you what you're doing now at the Brampton Resource Center. Some amazing things. Tell us about that.
Well, currently I'm the executive director of the Brampton Neighbourhood Resource Center, which is one of the largest multi-service human sites in Brampton. In 2005, we served about 80,000 people in the community of Brampton in the northern GTA area. And our services that we offer go from everything from early childhood programs to youth programs for at-risk youth. And we offer a lot of tutoring and sports programs and opportunities for the youth to meet sports athletes and to get help with their homework and stuff like that. And then we also have a seniors program. We teach free English as a second language to newcomers to Canada. We help with settlement for newcomers to Canada to get settlement services. We do a lot of things for free that people would go to an immigration lawyer for, and we do it for free.
Wow.
And then we have, a lot of community development initiatives that we participate in as well.
And of course we have Dr. Hutchinson's website that we'll be putting up from time to time so you could visit and find out some more. Now, your organization is being given quite a bit of publicity. Right now, some film is being made about it, a documentary one.
Yeah, I'm actually affiliated with another organization that's in Scarborough, and that's called Hoodlink Youth Organization. And that particular, I was a founding incorporating director of that organization with two colleagues from the community. They were just two community guys, and at the time I was an academic. And we started up this organization because we found that all of the problems of youth violence that were challenging the GTA, we're really struggling. I mean, as much it seemed like for all the new programs that were coming out, another young person was dying in Toronto, and so I engaged with a former gang member and a guy who was just a community activist, and we formed an organization, and we began to make a real difference with high-risk youth who have the guns, youth who are dealing the drugs, the youth who we really should be targeting and trying to impact and make a difference with. And that project gained all kinds of media attention, and legendary filmmaker Alan King, who did Warrendale in the 60s, heard me on a radio interview on the CBC, and came and followed up with the Hoodlink project, and it turned into a movie that was featured in the Toronto International Film Festival.
Wow. Now, the gang scene is brutal. It promises to offer these youth a sense of family, quick money, a glamorous lifestyle, and a lot of it is just sort of perpetrated by certain elements of the media. But you understand the culture of the gangs. You went from living under a bridge yourself. You've got quite the story to tell. I'm going to go for a break first, though, because I want to relate your story to what you've seen on the streets and how you're perhaps integrating both to the point that you've come to. We'll be back after this. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're telling you about the amazing story of Dr. Anthony Hutchinson. He went from living under a bridge to becoming an enormous success. In fact, he's been a professor at Ryerson University. He's now the CEO of Brampton Resource Center. They're making a film about that. Now, Dr. Hutchinson, before the break, I said something about youth violence, the Toronto gun violence, for example, people that get caught up in this lifestyle because it offers them something. It offers them a sense of belonging, a promise of quick money. You were entrapped in that. In fact, you were telling me in the break that you were actually a leader of a youth gang. Tell us why you walked this route in life.
Well, like I was saying, it started out when I was in grade 1. I had some problems seeing the chalkboard, and the school social worker came in to do some diagnostics, and she came across with the opinion that I was retarded. That was the word they used back then. And so they had to do some more stringent diagnostic testing with the school board psychologist, and he found that I was severely developmentally delayed. It turned out all I really needed was glasses,
My
but
goodness.
but that kind of followed me, and you know, once you got those labels, you know, and I was primarily at that time in a very non-diverse community in British Columbia, and so along with that, it became you're not the white kid, and then you're also got this disability. But I remember, and then I had some problems with my stepfather. As growing up, he used to practice beating me every day, pretty much. And so I think that as you feel the sense of disempowerment and alienation, and I remember the first time I picked up a gun at the age of 14 and pointed at somebody who was calling me retarded, they stopped very quickly.
And it gave you at that point a sense of power.
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, having this sense that, of a breach of trust by my my mother, or a breach of trust by my stepfather, more my stepfather, and a breach of trust by society, if you will. You want to react in such a way that where you gain a sense of enablement and empowerment. And when trust is breached by those closest to you, it's the most devastating thing that can happen to you. So it goes to this idiom, don't trust anyone. You trust in yourself, and you trust in what works. And like I said, when you have a gun in your hand and you can walk into a store and you can demand that somebody give you money, who cares if you don't get allowance from your parents, right? Or if you point a gun at somebody to stop them from disrespecting you, then that solves the problem of the stigmatization that you faced as you've been growing up. So I think that as we do look at the issues of let's say, youth violence, and what I've seen is there are a multiplicity of issues that are very complex, but ultimately, you can always trace things back to the sense of identity, a sense of gaining some sense of power under voice, or just trying to survive in a way that maybe you feel that you're not able to survive in that point in time.
You were also at one point in life living under a bridge. How did this happen?
Well, when I moved, I was really heavily supported. After I was arrested at the time, I was like 15 years old and in trouble and stuff like that. I began to turn my life around. I had a Christian social worker, or a youth worker, who really helped me out. And then I had this school teacher who helped me out. And between the two of them, they really helped me to turn my life around. And I got on track. But then when I ended up going from somebody who was primarily illiterate to somebody who scored one of the highest scholarship scores in history.
Wow.
And I ended up going to UBC, but all of a sudden I didn't have those same supports
But
around me
you went to
anymore.
many institutions as well. You went to the University of British Columbia. You've also attended McMaster University, where you got your MSW, Masters in Social Work.
Yeah.
You've attended university in Toronto, and you became a lecturer. What a far cry from what you were labeled from early on.
Well, yeah, and I think, like I said, initially I had a big stumble when I went to university at UBC, and I moved to Toronto because I didn't have the same levels of support anymore. And when you lack the supports, you can fall back to where you were.
How did you prevent that?
Well, I fell back and I ended up homeless. But I guess you just, when you've had a taste of success early on, or a taste of recovery, you want it back. So it became a long road back to wanting to take the steps and do the steps for what it would take to get there. From the time of like living under the bridge to the time of going on to do a science degree and a policy degree and a PhD, and becoming a professor and going on to be like an evaluator and what have you. When a lot of my peers and colleagues were in university, I was like living, in the university, not in the residence, but in the halls, the student halls, on the benches, sleeping in there. And I would see the other students who were eating, and they would like throw their food away. I had no money. I was like living off of a student loan, and I had no money for anything, and I would have to literally go into the garbage and eat their food, so I understand. And I remember one day when I was downtown at the university, I saw a homeless person going in, to the garbage to take food, and it just took me right back. And by that time I had already become a professor, and I remember going over to that person and giving them a substantive amount of money and saying, don't do this. Wow.
Dr. Hutchinson, we're going to have to go for a break. You're an amazing man. Something profound you said that I don't think I've ever heard it put that way. You mentioned a very, very key point, that once you've tasted success, and this wasn't even completed success, once you taste it, and you go backward, you want to return to that. I've heard it the other way around, that once you've tasted the bad life, there's always that pull in that direction, but you saw it opposite. My goodness, we're going to talk more about it after the break. Stay tuned. Hello again, and welcome back to our discussion with Dr. Anthony Hutchinson. Now, Dr. Hutchinson, that amazing concept that you said, you had that taste of success. So when you went back for a while, you had that desire to return to it. That was well said. Somehow you're a man that never loses vision. Why is it that you managed to keep your focus on a campus, eating out of the garbage can, and still you went from degree to degree, and there are others that just, they can't seem to. Now, I like to believe in the concept of hope. And I know that you do too with the work that you're doing. Can you explain this concept?
I think I learned at some point when I was with Brian Turco, who was a youth worker who really impacted me. He taught me music, so I traded my guns for guitars. And Fred Lepkin, who was the high school teacher, taught me how to memorize and use music lyrics to learn to read. And I think that I became a pretty popular musician in my last couple of years in high school, and I actually did really well in high school, and I had the support of the teacher, and I think understanding that I could actually do something constructive and make a difference.
So it's important to find that within every child.
Yeah, you need to find what their niche is, what excites them, what they can be passionate about. I became passionate about history and music, but when I went to UBC the first time round, unfortunately I had to take a whole bunch of other courses that were totally meaningless to me, when I should have just taken history and I would have excelled. Maybe I should have taken music, but instead I went and took some other kind of useless courses, and I ended up kind of falling on my face because it went back to what I didn't know, and at that time, and I wasn't this super rounded person at that time. And so, but I knew, and when I came to Toronto and I tried to make a go of it, and I ended up on the street, I heard all of the voices. People in Vancouver told me, "You're going to come back. You're going to come back as a failure." And
these were friends that you
These
made.
were friends, and they were expecting me.
But were they not in a gang life and so forth at that point?
They had their own
they wanted
shortcomings.
They wanted you back.
Maybe, but they had their own shortcomings, and they really thought that I was going to come back as a failure, and I was scared to go back as a failure. Back to Vancouver, and so that was a driving force. But then here, as I was going back to school, there were people who were saying, "What, are you going to be a professional student all your life? Oh, come on, go get a job." And those people who it was to them, I'm like, no, I can make something. I can become someone. I can make a difference. And I think that as people challenged me and tried to tear me down and break me down in those ways, my response was no. I was a good musician when I remember way back then, and I got a scholarship to go to UBC way back then, even though I was for the most part illiterate up until grade 10, right? So I knew that there were certain things that I had the capacity to accomplish. The difference was, as I was going through it in the second time around, I didn't have supports around me. The only person I had to rely on was myself and my own sense of an inner strength or a faith in knowing that there was somebody looking out for me or over my shoulder. But along the way, it became just I think it was I transformed the negative energy into my own positive energy. The fine line came between using anger in a constructive way as well. I think that's a challenge that a lot of young people, and I don't know where I learned that from, but it is a challenge that a lot of people go through, right? And I think that, like I said, it goes back to the whole, what do we mean by trust? It's when you need to trust in who you are, but also I believe there's a strong spiritual component to every person that we also need to look forward to, because if you don't have that, then you just become hopeless. I believe the sense of hope is connected to a kind of a spiritual component. And then the last thing I just want to say is also, there's a distinction between hope and expectation. As people, we expect things, and when you expect things, you set yourself up for disappointment when they don't happen. And we expect things from our loved ones, we expect things from our spouses or the people we love. But when we hope for things, if it doesn't come to fruition, you're never disappointed.
And you keep moving on.
And you keep moving
to
on.
Other things.
And so I always hoped for a good grade. And I knew, even sometimes I thought I was going to get a great grade in school. I went from scholarship to scholarship, but I never knew really if I was going to get like an A or an A+. And sometimes I ended up with a C-, and I thought I did an A+ report. So it would all depend. But we need to work hard, keep focused, and always have hope. But the minute that we fall into that fine line of expecting things and becoming entitled about things, and that was one of the reasons why in the university culture with a lot of students nowadays, I just was so offended as a teacher, because there's such a sense of entitlement.
Yes.
You know, I hand in my report, I deserve an A. Well, that's not the way I got through school. You know, and so I think that, you know, teachers need, unfortunately we live in a very entitled society now, and I think it's very difficult for teachers to do their jobs both in high school and in universities, because there's such a sense of entitlement in our culture of entitlement, what I call a culture of entitlement in North America, where nowadays we just, you know, we hand something in and expect, and they don't fail students anymore, they just pass them and keep passing them, and unfortunately we don't have the resources in our education system that we should have to be giving our young people the educational experiences that they deserve in the most developed country in the world.
Wow, so. Dr. Hutchinson, how I wish I had you for a full hour. I'm going to have to ask you to come back some other time to talk some more. Okay. We're out of time. It was so great having you, and please visit Dr. Anthony Hutchinson's website. We've had it up a couple of times. Can you say what that is again?
It's www.bnrc.org, and my email is tonyh@bnrc.org, tonyh@bnrc.org.
Thank you again. On our next program, we'll be talking about the toxins that live in our bodies. I'm Christine Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.